how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. I got some new subscribers. Thank you very much. Hope you like what you find here. My name is Jeff. This is my cave of cool books. And today I want to talk about some hard-boiled detective fiction. In fact, maybe the hardest boiled of all hard-boiled detectives you're going to find out there, at least in the classic era of detectives, private eyes, private dicks, and that is Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer. I read The Twisted Thing. Now, this is the 9th novel in the Mike Hammer series. Now, after Mickey Spillane passed away, I know that Max Allan Collins continued to write some Mike Hammer novels, and I'm sure he did a great job because he's a very good writer. But this is part of the original series. This was published in 1966. This is a Signet edition, one of those kind of silly photo cover ones, and the photo is really small, and it's obviously a nude woman in silhouette, but you can't really see anything. Some of these photo covers get a little more risque, shall we say, but this book is pretty great if you like that kind of violent, hard-edged, seedy kind of detective fiction. It's not sleazy. It's not a lot of sex involved in this one. I'm sure some of the Mike Hammer books, other ones that I haven't read yet, are more so. But this is just pretty much a straight-up mystery, but with a lot of violent action. Now, Mike Hammer, just so everyone knows, Mike Hammer is not exactly a nice guy. I mean, he's a very loyal friend, and if he likes you and thinks you're a good person or innocent person, he will go to the mat for you. But woe betide you if you try to get one over on him, or are an evil mofo. He's going to do some serious damage. He does not mess around. I'm going to read you a couple of snippets later to show you what kind of a guy Mike Hammer is, at least when the chips are down and the going gets tough. Watch out. You don't want to mess with him. Okay. So this is an interesting one. Let me show you the back here and read you a little bit of that back blurb, and then I'll also read the blurb here in the front, which gives kind of a better indication of the plot. So on the back, here's Hammer, betting, brawling, snarling. Here's Spillane holding back till the very last line to explode the power punch. And that's all you get on the back, plus some, raves from various periodicals of the time. Mike Hammer in a case which shows him at his best. Charlotte Observer. A blockbuster. This is the best Spillane this reader's ever encountered. The Buffalo Courier Express. I wonder if any of these papers are still going in this day and age where newspapers are thin on the ground anymore. Spillane is a master in compelling you always to read the next page, the New York Times. I know that one's still around. This is centered around kind of a wealthy doctor named Rudolph York and his brilliant genius 14-year-old son Rustin and the household around there, and in this small-ish city called Sidon, I think. It's kind of, near the coast, away from New York, a couple hours out of New York. New York City is where Mike Hammer usually lays his shingle and does his thing. But he's in a small town, corrupt cop area in this book, and he's up against it through a lot of the book. It's a lot of fun and a twisty plot, and there is some twisted things in this book. Okay, who snatched the kid? The sadistic cop, the He-Man lady, the ex-stripper, or Cousin Alice who always wanted to take off her clothes? Who planned the father's death? This was the clincher. The way Hammer figured it, the kidnapping of the 14-year-old genius was just a way of killing off his wealthy scientist father. So Mike Hammer dug into a mystery that began 14 years ago that led him into a house full of weirdos and onto the track of the most venomous killer in the whole Spillane camp. You always can expect a shocker from Spillane, but you won't be expecting this one. Dun, dun. So this was about 160 pages, fairly small print, told from the point of view of Hammer. We're in Hammer's mindset the whole time, and Spillane writes like a dream for this kind of tough, sometimes you almost think it's a parody of the detective private eye fiction tropes and things, but this is one of the things that set the bar. Now, this is a later era Spillane book, and some of the ones after this one maybe aren't quite as good, but this one still kicks. The book opens with Hammer in the local police headquarters in this smaller city, Sidon or whatever it's called, and this guy named Dilwick, this kind of chief of police or the main cop in this town, is beating the crap out of this suspect named Billy. Billy's a chauffeur for this rich scientist, Rudolph York. And the whole idea of there being a rich scientist is interesting. But anyway, I guess he was independently wealthy maybe before he was a scientist, since most scientists are probably not rich. Anyway, Dilwick is beating on this poor young guy, and Hammer is seething with rage. And, that's a frequent condition for Mike Hammer. And when he's had enough, and at a certain point when this Dilwick guy gets in Hammer's face, Hammer clocks him, smashes his nose and breaks a few teeth, and then stalks out and tells the front desk clerk, hey, if you don't release this kid, you don't have anything to hold him on. This kid, Billy, this chauffeur, who has been, is the kind of been fingered as maybe a possible suspect in the kidnapping of Rustin York, the 14-year-old son of Rudolph York, those local rich scientists. The reason Billy was brought into the police for very brutal, torturous questioning is that he's a two-time ex-con, but he's a friend of Mike, and he had somehow called Mike, and Mike got in. Mike Hammer always has lots of low-life friends and contacts and sources for information and such. And he likes this kid and thinks he's been trying to go straight, and so he's there to protect him. And basically says, release this kid or I'm going to the state police, and it's going to unnest a whole bunch of vipers here. This police force in this town of Sidon is famous for, or infamous for, having a lot of corrupt cops on the take, and that done brutal things in the past. And so a lot of the other stateies are not exactly sad if Hammer's smashing this guy Dilwick's face. After that stage, Hammer drives up to the Rustin estate, walks on in. The boy's still kidnapped, and Rudolph York, the father, is beside himself and all upset. There's a bunch of his family, his relatives, his hangers-on, like vultures waiting around because they want their piece of the pie for this Rudolph York's estate. And Hammer comes in and first is confronting York about, hey, why did you finger this kid, Billy? I'm going to read you a little section here. It's pretty fun because this shows you the kind of operator Hammer is. This is Hammer confronting York in York's big palatial estate living room. This is going to be York. He kept beating his fist into an open palm. I don't want the police involved, do you hear? This is a private matter. Cool off, Doc. This is Hammer. Cool off, Doc. I'm not the police. However, if you try to keep me out of this, I'll buzz one of the papers, then your privacy will really be shot to hell. Whom do you represent? He asked coldly. Your chauffeur, Billy Parks. So I'd like to know why you put the finger on him when you found out your kid was missing. I'd like to know why you let them mangle him without a formal charge even being lodged, and why you're keeping all this under your hat. And by damn, you better start speaking, and pretty loud at that. Please, Mr. Hammer. A hand hit my shoulder and spun me. Another came up from the side and cracked across my face. The punk said, how dare you talk to Uncle like that? I let him get it out, then backhanded him across the mouth with all I had. This time the other one grabbed my coat. He got a short jab in the ribs that bent him over, and then the palm of my hand across his puss that straightened him up again. I shoved him away and got the punk's tie in my hand. When he was breathing in my face, I twisted on the tie till the blue started running up his neck. Then I smacked him on each side of that whiskey-sodden face until my hand hurt. When I dropped him, he lay on the floor crying, trying to cover his face with his hands. I spoke to the General Assembly rather than to him. In case anyone else has ideas like that, he'd better have more in his hands than a whiskey glass. Don't mess around with Hammer. He is a live nerve ready to explode. He is the roughest, toughest, most brutal and sadistic probably of any private eye. Again, it makes him sound really nasty. He's basically a gorilla in a pork pie hat and a suit, but in a lot of ways, but he's got quite good brains. You know, he figures out stuff. He doesn't always, and he berates himself when he's behind, but he does get there in the end. And the main thing with Hammer is he doesn't tend to let the killer get off. It's justified homicide, I guess you could say, when he gets a hold of the killers, or self-defense usually. Anyway, once Hammer gets, Billy back safe and the doctor is, seeing to him and that Billy's okay, he's been released by the police and goes up to rest. Hammer decides, hey, I'll look in, basically he's impressed the doctor enough, York, to ask him to try to, look into things. And Hammer says, I'll try to find your son. And he learns something. He wants to know about the household. And so he meets a bunch of the people, the family members. He meets kind of, not a nanny exactly, but I guess a live-in assistant lady who cares for Rustin, the 14-year-old genius. So basically York has been kind of almost like a Doc Savage sort of thing, origin. He's been taking his, since a baby age, he's taken his son Rustin and crammed as much knowledge as he can into the kid's brain. The kid still likes sports and, cowboys and such, but he can speak several languages. He's a polymath. He's brilliant. And the impression is that York has spent a lot of time almost using his kid as an experiment that he wants to, hopefully present his findings and get some kind of big scientific award. Hammer doesn't think much of that, and some of that will play into the plot later. Hammer notices, though, that this woman that has been, the kind of caretaker for Rustin she goes by Miss Malcolm. She's a very foxy lady. And of course, Hammer recognizes her as an ex-stripper named Roxy. Now, he doesn't bust her cover or, he doesn't divulge her past because she's on her own way trying to go straight. But, he does come at her for some inside information. There's a lot of other people involved in the case, but the book right away kind of resolves the kidnapping thing. Hammer goes into investigation mode, tracks down where this kid is being held, and poor kid's kind of down, just basically naked almost in this, and dirty and bruised up and beaten, and he's tied up in this kind of big drainage pipe thing that out near the coast of this kind of bay area. And Hammer gets in there and is ready to rescue the kid. He's really impressed with this kid's resilience. But this is when he's just found the kid, and he's, the kidnappers come upon Mike in the middle of rescue and what happens there. This is at the end of chapter 2. In a moment, I was on my knees beside him, working the knots loose. I took it easy on the adhesive tape that covered his mouth so I wouldn't tear the skin off. His body shook with sobs. Tears of fright and relief filled his large, expressive eyes, and when he had his arms free, he threw them around my neck. Go ahead and cry, kid, I said. So see, Hammer can be pretty gentle when he needs to be. He did then, hard, body-racking gasps that must have hurt. I wiggled out of my jacket and put it around him, talking quickly and low to comfort him. The poor kid was a mess. It came with jarring suddenness, that sound. I shoved the kid on his back and pivoted on my heels. I was shooting before I completed the turn. Someone let out a short scream. A heavy body crashed into my chest and slammed my back against the wall. I kicked out with both feet and we spilled to the floor. Before I could get my gun up, a heavy boot ripped it out of my hand. They were all over me. I gave it everything I had, feet, fingernails, and teeth. There wasn't enough room to swing. Somehow I managed to hook my first 2 fingers in a mouth and yank, and I felt a cheek rip clear to the ear. Ugh. There was no more for me. Something smashed down on my skull and I stopped fighting. It was a peaceful feeling, as if I were completely adrift from my body. Feet thudded into my ribs and pounded my back raw, but there was no pain, merely vague impressions. Then even the impressions began to fade. That's on page 37, and we have many more fights and beatings and twists and turns and violence and dead bodies to go. Basically what happens is Mike, the kid sticks around, as Mike really damaged these kidnappers, and they ran off briefly looking for the kid because the kid had ran outside and hid. And then the kid comes back in, Rustin comes back in and says, "Come on, Mr. Hammer, let's go." Or, "Come on, Mr." And so he helps Mike get back to the car. They take off, and he brings him home to the York residence. Everyone's happy, or seemingly happy. Who knows if everyone is. One other character that is conspicuously missing at this stage is a woman called Myra Grange. And Myra Grange is the medical assistant in these so-called experiments or training for Rustin, assisting Rudolph York. And before you know it, York is dead, a meat cleaver in his skull. Miss Grange is missing, her car floating in a lake, no body to speak of, and all sorts of other stuff is going on. And Hammer has been given a $10,000 retainer, and he starts beating the bushes to find out what is the real situation and who killed Rudolph York, his client. Very intense in parts, quite well written, and the ending is kind of a shocker. So I think that's something that Spillane is known for, and it's not the usual Spillane murderer, let's put it that way, in this one. Very interesting, fun. I wouldn't call it pulpy because it's written at a pretty high level, I would say, but it's definitely not for the faint of heart. It is some hardcore stuff as far as the violence goes. And Hammer, as you could tell, Hammer really dishes out. He can take a beating, and he can really dish them out, and he does. Not to mention some 45 slugs into the forehead when it is called for. The descriptions are pretty graphic, but also, most of it is investigation. At some point, Hammer's on the lam, kind of hiding out and crawling around through woods and doing lots of different exciting action things, breaking into places that are watched by the police, etc., to get information. He does have an ally, not his usual ally, Pat Chambers of the New York Police, who is in most of the Hammer books. And he does make a cameo appearance in one chapter when Mike goes back to New York to dig around in some library information to get some stuff, to find some facts about the past, 14 years in the past. And but there is another sergeant named Price who is not part of the corrupt city cops. He's more a state cop, and he and Hammer work pretty well together. But mostly Hammer's lone wolfing it. He does do some. He does get a sexy time with a hot young lady, but mostly it's wham bam slam, tough action all the way. This is a very fun book if you like that kind of thing. It might be too rough for a certain polite crowd, but if you like hardcore, hard-boiled, detective fiction, then you could hardly go wrong with this one. This is very fun. Again, this is The Twisted Thing by Mickey Spillane, the 9th in the Mike Hammer series. Now, Mickey Spillane wrote some other series characters. I think he has a spy character, some espionage books. I can't remember the name of that character, but of course he's most famous for Mike Hammer, and he even played Mike Hammer in a movie, The Girl Hunters, alongside Shirley Eaton, the famous golden girl from Goldfinger, beautiful British actress. And believe it or not, Mickey Spillane did a pretty good job as Hammer. He's maybe not as big as Hammer. He's as wide as Hammer, maybe, but he's not as big, tall as Hammer is described in the books. There's a lot of movie adaptations and a very good TV series starring Stacy Keach from the 80s, Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer, and I think the new Mike Hammer was the subsequent series. That's a very fun and good show. It captures some of the toughness of Hammer. Stacy Keach plays him a little more soft-spoken maybe than you could get the sense of from the book, but that's a really fun series. And of course, back in the late 50s, Darren McGavin, good old Carl Kolchak, believe it or not, did a very good take on Mike Hammer in another series called Mike Hammer, of course, and going around with a swagger and kneeing bad guys in the face and romancing the various dames he comes across and femme fatales. That's a really fun series. Both of those series are out on DVD. I own them and watch them occasionally. A lot of fun. I haven't read a lot of Spillane novels, So, but I really enjoyed this one, so I will read more in the future. Anyway, that's my review of The Twisted Thing by Mickey Spillane. Hope everyone's enjoying what you're reading for this month, and I will see you in the next video.